Hey Internet, Eric here. If you've seen my past videos, I've mentioned many times how much I love the film Pet Sematary. And how much I love the book Pet Sematary. It was one of my first reviews on this channel. Feel free to go check it out. And I recently also reviewed the sequel with Edward Furlong and Clancy Brown. And I've mentioned her before. I have a good friend named Mel. And I've known her forever. You know, God, back on MySpace when MySpace was relevant. And I'm sure a lot of you people don't even know what the fuck MySpace is. So that tells you how long I've known this girl. And she's also the wonderful person who suggested that when I first got into doing movie reviews that I review My Boyfriend's Back. Well, feel free to go ahead and check out that review to see what I think of that wonderful film. And for some fucking reason, that video of mine has like over 500 views. I don't know what the fuck it is about that review that made it so popular, I guess. Who knows? Anyways, Mel and I share a love of Pet Sematary. And recently this year, there was a documentary released about the making of the film. And you really could only order it through the producer's website or the production company's website, I don't know. And you had to do like a pre-order. Of course, I missed out on the pre-order. However, Mel was cool enough to get a copy, and she sent me her copy after she watched it because she wanted to hear my thoughts on Unearthed and Untold, The Path to Pet Sematary. And this is going to be my first ever review of a documentary. So bear with me, I don't know how this is going to come off compared to a regular movie review. But yeah, this was done by Terror Films, Terror. 2016, came out just this year. And a lot of thought and effort and great execution was put into this. They got damn near everyone involved with the first film to be in this documentary. Be it the actors like Dale Midkiff and Denise Crosby and Miko Hughes, like, the main characters. They got the two Burdall twins who played Ellie Creed. And you got some secondary characters like, the actor who played Victor Pascal and Zelda. And director Mary Lambert's in there. And you have background characters like the truck driver and Timmy Baterman and Timmy Baterman's father and Missy Dandridge, all these characters. So they got so many actors. Obviously they couldn't get Fred Gwynne, who played Judd Crandall, because he's been passed away for years. And Stephen King's, I'm not surprised they couldn't get Stephen King at all. But they got writers, they got the people who owned the house that was the Creed's house, people that were in charge of the landscape, makeup effects artist. So the connections were made with people who needed to be in this film, or this documentary. And it's really well done. The narrative is told basically from, it starts off, first off, if you have not seen Pet Sematary, I'm going to have to spoil some major plot points to explain this documentary. So if you've never seen Pet Sematary, stop this video, go watch the film, and then come back. And that'll probably give me a second viewing. But I'm telling you right now, stuff's going to get spoiled, so it's your own fault. Anyways, it starts off, and the only real footage we get of Stephen King is he's doing a speech at, I don't know, a local school or something, or a college, and he's talking about how he thought Pet Sematary would never have been read because the subject matter was so black, so dark. So he put it away for years, and the only reason why it was published was to finish his contract with Doubleday. And then it goes off, and we just meet the actors. We meet, we learn Stephen King's only requirements were that he write the screenplay and it take place in Maine. So we get this background on the city that it was done in, and how it helped bring in, money to the city. So there's see, I don't know how to really explain a documentary. We get so many. How do I say this? The filmmakers could not get the rights to showing footage of the film. So what was really cool is there are so many behind the scenes photos in this documentary. Like you see literally the actors just sitting there on set being themselves. You see behind the scenes footage of rehearsals. And when you can't get what they're talking about at like a specific moment, say like the funeral scene with Gage's, Gage's funeral, and they're talking about the emotional, process of doing that scene. They didn't have any behind the scenes photos, so what was cool is they had a sketch artist, and he did this through multiple scenes, sketch out what you would be seeing in that scene. So that is a fantastic idea, and I loved it. And the sketch artist was wonderful. He could really fucking draw. So that was cool how they were able to handle the fact that they couldn't show any film, because of Paramount owning the movie. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Miko Hughes, who plays young Gage Creed, he doesn't really have a lot to say because he flat out says it right there. He was only 2 years old, so he doesn't remember a lot. But Mary Lambert goes on to say how they had to film. They filmed the movie progressively, from beginning to end, and she did that so Miko could gain trust with all the actors and actresses because he had to pretend he knew these people, he was comfortable around it. So that was really cool. I loved a lot of the behind the scenes photos with the makeup of Victor Pascal and the actor Brad Greenquist, I think. If I'm wrong, I'll put his name down in the subtitles. He read the script, and what was cool is he's sitting there in the makeup chair smoking a cigarette and stuff like that. So that's funny pictures. But I liked how he said that his character, Victor Pascal, was not necessarily a ghost, but he thought of him as an angel. The angel on Louis Creed's shoulder telling him what he shouldn't do. And what he says, his little portfolio that he kept his script in, he plastered it all over, the cover, the front of it, with pictures of angels to get him in the right mood, in the right mind frame. So that was cool. I loved how you can tell when you were talking to Denise Crosby and you were talking to Dale Midkiff, the parents in the film, and you were talking to Blaze and Bo Burdall, the two twins who played Ellie. Man, they grew up pretty, but you could tell that there was a bond there. You could tell that they got along great, like a family, and it was really cool. Like I said, chemistry. Chemistry with a family has to be believable, and the way that they spoke of each other, you could tell that they really cared about each other. I like the randomness of who they hired, like the greenskeeper, who was in charge, or the groundskeeper, whatever, who was in charge of the way the Pet Sematary looked, the authentic feel of it. I loved, they showed where the deadfall was and what they did to create the deadfall, and some of the destroyed trees were still there to that day. That was really cool. I liked how they tell you how Stephen came up with this idea because his daughter's cat Smucky was hit by a vehicle, and it happened while his daughter was away. And he thought to himself, I'll just bury it and just say he ran away. But his wife told him, you got to explain, death, regardless. So he told her what happened, and he found out that they were vacationing in a townhouse, and behind the townhouse there was a little path to a local pet cemetery that was created by young children. And this documentary actually found out who created that actual Pet Sematary, and she spoke to the camera and talked about creating it, and Stephen meeting with her and going. There was some cool pictures of Stephen in the actual Pet Sematary itself, and I didn't notice it, but in the very beginning of the film, when you're seeing the Pet Sematary, you see all the headstones, and the kids are reading them out loud. One of them is actually a headstone of Smucky, Steven's daughter's cat, which was a cool little tidbit that I never saw. Let's talk about the Zelda character. Rachel's dead sister that she would always have visions of. They explained how a man had to portray him, or a man had to portray Zelda because I believe Mary Lambert thought it would look more unnatural. And you got to speak with Andrew Hubestank, I believe his name is. He's there talking about what he had to do with makeup and stuff like that. And they show behind the scenes photos of the back appliances and stuff like that. And he enjoys the notoriety he gets because he legitimately loves the fact that when he does these conventions, people will come up to him and they will say how he was the most terrifying thing in that entire film. And lots of people who love this film agree with it. Zelda is one of the most frightening aspects of Pet Sematary. I love the little tribute to Fred Gwynne. They talked about how he's basically known for the monsters. And Mary Lambert said he was perfect because you took him out of that comedic world, where he's Herman Munster, and you threw him into this serious role, be it, a supernatural horror type film or whatever. And he does a fantastic job. You get to see how great of an actor he really was when he wasn't being typecast, Miko Hughes talked about how I had no idea that Fred Gwynne had written children's books. And they showed some children's books, and he talked about how he still has them, and they're autographed by Fred. Dale Midkiff was talking about how he would go over for dinner, and Fred just treated everybody wonderfully. So that was really cool to see. Some behind-the-scenes stuff when they explained how Fred died. Fred's, not how he literally died, how his character Judd dies. And they showed how they created the scalpel through the Achilles tendon, and the bite, that Gage does when it rips his throat out. They explained how that traumatized little Miko Hughes, and it took all day to calm him down. And then it was funny seeing behind-the-scenes photos of Fred Gwynne walking around, blood streaming down his mouth, the piece of his neck missing. He's got this big shit-eating grin, like it's, he's just saying, "Hey folks, how's it going?" It was cool that they even talked to Marky Ramone of all people, because there's a Ramone song, "Sheena is a Punk Rocker," that plays during Gage's death. Remember, I already warned you about spoilers. But they also did the you would call the theme song that plays during the ending credits, and Marky talked about how Dee Dee finished the book and wrote the song in like 40 minutes. I mean, Marky's literally in this documentary for like 3 minutes total. But it's cool that it shows who they talk to. Like I said, they talked to Timmy Baterman, the actor that played Timmy Baterman, and how he had to convince the actor who played his father to let him get caught on fire, and he promised he'd be safe. And then Mary Lambert talked about how they literally burned that fucking house to the ground. And when you see that footage in the film of Timmy Baterman's house burning, that's a real huge house. And she said that when those gasoline tanks went, the wind just hit it at the right moment, and that's how you get that wonderful visual. And speaking of fires, at the very end, after Rachel has been killed by Gage, and Lewis is on his way to the Pet Sematary to hopefully bring her back and her be normal. he sets the house of Judd on fire. And I didn't know this. There's a scene, if you watch it closely, when he's carrying Rachel's corpse, and one of the windows explodes, and the flames shoot out at Lewis, and he kind of winces like that. Apparently, Midkiff was actually really burned. He got second-degree burns because that was that dummy that he was carrying of Rachel was so heavy that he couldn't get it up high enough to block the flame, so he suffered second-degree burns there. One thing I do not want to spoil, but what is really cool is they explained how little Gage, little Miko Hughes, how they made it seem like his character was hit by this gigantic Mack truck. And just the way they went about it shows how they kept him 100% safe, and I was totally surprised how they did it. Yeah, just the way that, we'll just say smoke and mirrors effect. How they did it was so cool and so ingenuitive, I guess. Really, really enjoyed it. And then they bring up the fact that how a lot of people have said that, this movie creeped them out to begin with, but after they've had children, myself included, it's a lot harder to watch. And when Dale Midkiff is talking about that, because he says he did not have kids at the time, but now he's got 3 children, and he was talking about the scene where Gage was killed. He was talking about the funeral scene, and he says, just the thought of losing a child, that child's innocence being taken away, its life being taken away, he breaks down, and he has to gather his thoughts to continue his sentence or whatever, his monologue or whatever, talking about the scene. And it shows how it really affects people. How now, if you've seen that, and then have a child of your own, how you get a whole new feeling to this film. And then one final cool thing I'll say is Paramount said the ending needed that little extra punch. And we know the ending. Rachel comes back from being buried in the cemetery. She comes back. She disgustingly makes out with Lewis, complete with, brain fluid leaking out of her face, which was cool. Great gory effect. And then she grabs a knife and then cuts to black and you hear Lewis scream. They talk about how there was actually 3 endings. Now, you had the ending where literally she comes home, she walks up to Lewis, she places her hand on Lewis's shoulder, says, I'm home, darling, something like that, and then cuts to black and Lewis screams. They mention the original idea that Stephen King had, which I thought would have been really, really cool. Denise Crosby's character, I already forgot. Denise Crosby's character comes home, and she's all chopped to bits, and suddenly the phone rings, and it's Ellie, calling in Chicago, worrying about Daddy. Is Daddy okay? Mommy, did you get there all right? And she talks to Ellie, and she says, yes, sweetheart, everything is just fine. Hangs up the phone, and you don't see Lewis yet. And then that part was cool, but then I guess Steven says she turns to the camera, and she smiles, and her teeth are all disgusting. That I'm glad that they didn't use, because I hate when you have a perfect film like that, and then they kind of break the fourth wall. It's really stupid. I've always hated that. Like Freddy vs. Jason, the very end where he winks at the camera. That's retarded. So I'm glad they didn't go with that idea. So they contacted Denise Crosby, and they told her, we just need to bring you back. We need to reshoot the ending. So she talked about how she was getting all made up, and the appliances stuck to her, and the bladders that pours the brain fluid out. And she said, let's do this. And she was so psyched to be doing this. You could tell she was having fun because a lot of the behind the scenes photos were her looking all sexy and stuff with her fucking eye missing and half of her scalp. So that was really cool. The only qualms I have about this documentary, because it is very, very, very good. I really, really enjoyed it overall. You must see it if you're a fan of the film or the book. Is I understand they couldn't obviously get Fred Gwynn because he's been dead since 93, 94. It would have been nice if maybe they could have talked to his wife, because they mentioned his wife. I don't know if he's still alive. Or anyone that knew Fred personally outside of the film. And honestly, I wish they would have had more contact with Stephen King. I mean, I understand the man's fucking busy, but it would have been cool to maybe see other clips from different visits of his, talking about the film, talking about the book. All we really get is the very beginning where he talks about how he put the book away because he thought it would be no one would want to read it because the subject matter. So that was real disappointing. I wish we had more Stephen King physically. I mean, they tell stories about how Stephen King was rehearsing his lines because he has the cameo there. Another thing I really wish, it's a bonus feature, but it's a very short bonus feature. I wish they had more convention footage, more talk with the fans, how much they enjoy this film, what it meant to them. They had a couple people there discussing it, during the documentary. I just wish they had more convention footage, seeing the actors in the element mingling with the fans. That would have really been cool. I really would have enjoyed that. More talk about how it's now got a cult following and still be loved, instead of just a little it's still loved by fans type of text at the end. But and it would have been cool that even though part 2 wasn't really well received, it would have been a nice mention that they had a sequel, because Mary Lambert was the director of the sequel. So I really wish they would have had at least a mention. And maybe, not necessarily, you didn't have to fucking talk to Clancy Brown or Edward Furlong or anybody. But just a little mention of it. The fact that there is a sequel would have been nice. But overall, like I said, that's the reason why I didn't love this film, was because I wish we had more interaction with Stephen King and more talk about the impact that it's had with people and conventions. But overall, I highly, highly recommend Unearthed and Untold: Path to Pet Sematary. I don't know how you're going to be able to get a hold of this unless you illegally download it, because as of right now, according to the Facebook page, it's totally sold out. So I was lucky Mel was, cool enough to let me borrow this. So if you can find yourself a copy, man, seriously fucking get it and watch it and enjoy it. Because I didn't even mention, they had, they talked to the actress who played Missy Dandridge, the housekeeper, or the lady who just comes over and does the laundry, and how people just disliked her so much that they were cheering for her during her suicide scene. They wanted her, I think she said she heard one lady yell, "Jump, bitch," when, she's hanging herself. They talk about how, they talked to the actor who played young Judd, who had no idea basically what he was doing. And, they took 10 takes because he kept saying Judd's name instead of Spot's name, his dog. The woman who played Judd's mom was in it. They talked to the girl who played young Rachel. They talked about her interaction with Zelda, the actor who played Zelda, and stuff like that, how he would tease her and say, "Rachel," off screen, stuff like that, and how she had no idea how this would be a big phenomenon. So they got everyone that they could find and put it in this documentary. Fantastically well done. So those minor qualms that doesn't give it a love, but just a really like from me. But yeah, seriously, if you can find a way to get a hold of this film, this documentary, give it a shot, especially if you're a fan of the book or the movie. And I do not think you'll be disappointed. So in the end, thanks, Mel. Thanks for letting me borrow this. I'll get it back to you sooner or later because I still have to review The Accountant, another short film that she wanted me to review, which I will get to. It shouldn't take too long. It's only a half hour. But it stars Walton Goggins. But speaking of this, like I said, I've said it ad nauseum. Find a way to get a hold of this Pet Sematary documentary. You won't be disappointed. So thanks for watching. I've got a bunch of new subscribers, so welcome. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell Joe Schmo down the street who just got internet. Hey, watch this dude. Drink some alcohol and review movies. So anyway, in the end, I guess I'll say cheers. And just like old Judd Crandall said, sometimes dead is better.